appreciate that there's flexibility in rejigging the data this, so thank you for that. If we go through the items, agenda plus, does everyone know everyone in the room? Right, okay, yeah, we just met.
Yes, we have.
Go through any of these license.
Yes, we've had apologies from Assistant Chief Fire Officer Brian Thompson, Assistant Chief Fire Officer Dean Loader, Head of Finance, Property and Procurement Lisa Mullen, and Head of Corporate Support Wayne Thomas.
Right, okay then. If we have service heads giving apologies, would they send deputies? What's the normal?
No, not previously.
So if they're representing their department then, on the committee, how is that feedback for them? Is it just the minutes that they then take?
We would take back to the VLT to the heads that have been described there. We would take back any information and convey that, make sure that it was closed off.
Right.
On the papers.
When we get into, because I think there's sometimes something about timing when you get meetings coming towards the summer leave period where people are going to be, lots of people can be off. But I think also like use developmental is for people who are number twos in the system. If their bosses are unable to make it, they can pin for them. There's some sort of, because there's quite a few people, there's quite a few heads of service missing. I think, yeah, so I think we should look at that. Right, any declarations of interest other than those already submitted and or company secretary? Right. Chairperson's announcements to make prior to this. Reports for information. So we take item 4 on the agenda. Point back. In alignment of the services plan, the strategic quality plan to the Morris report. Partial recommendations. So, Alison, you talk to us or you talk to this? Okay, all right.
Morning, everyone. So, going through the report, as you will be aware, January of this year saw the publication of what is referred to as the Morris Report, which contained 82 recommendations arising from the culture review undertaken by Fenella Morris KC during 2023. These recommendations were accepted by South Wales Fire and Rescue Service and work commenced immediately to analyse where the recommendations mapped across to our existing activities in an effort to assure alignment and prevent duplication. As a public body, Commissioner will be aware that the Equality Act 2010 mandates that the service must have a strategic quality plan, objectives, sets the direction to advance the service's progression towards achieving equity. And the strategic equality plan is underpinned by our inclusive action plan, which has details, tasks and actions. The strategic equality plan for 2023 to 2026 was also included in the analysis, and there is clear alignment between many of the Morris Report recommendations, the strategic equality plan and the inclusive action plan. And there are a number of recommendations where there was not a direct link identified, but these have been identified in red on Appendix 1 of the report. This plan will be regularly reviewed to track progress. There are resource implications which have already been considered and addressed separately. However, resource will be regularly reviewed as the actions and objectives are progressed. I'm asking Commissioner to consider and note the contents of the report. I'm happy to take any
questions? So, Dominic, in regard to your work and overseeing the whole element, this is the HR people side. Is this fit within the systems of work that you've got, being able to put it all together into one process because you have all the other departments to look at as well?
Yes, so we've had quite a bit of engagement around the Equalities Action Plan and with people services. The way that we've set the transformation programme up has a number of key projects. One of those is now equality and diversity, and the main driver within that programme will be the Inclusive Action Plan. So we've aligned it so that we're not duplicating work and that we've got areas of responsibility on that. The project executives, sponsors, the project managers of that will be the people that are responsible for the equality plan. So it's consistently delivered with the same people.
Okay, just to another follow-up question. Do we think we've got the right software in place to manage this from a systems point of view, lining up the software that you'll be using? And we've got the IT in where we want it to do this properly.
So I think the HR core system that drives a lot of the HR processes we are committed to for a number of years. I think a few more years, 3 years around that program. There has been some work with Matthew, the EDI lead, around our data reporting. So that's the first piece of work that's gone through those work groups and has gone through Matthew as part of that piece of work. I think we're in a good position with that. That's due to come into SLT shortly, and then that should align with the development of our performance dashboards and company dashboards, which will be future pieces of
Okay.
work that are delivered in those areas. But he has done some work around how we collate that into the core HR system.
Yeah, because you want them to be self-populated when possible, as opposed to having to be entered manually.
Yeah, I think it's useful direction of travel in terms of the culture dashboard as well, and the new NFCC tool that's now available for us to utilise to benchmark our work against in terms of developing that culture dashboard will be useful going forward to have everything in one place. I agree, self-populating data and information takes the labour out of it, doesn't it?
Also, it not only takes the labour, it takes the improves the accuracy. Step up. There was I was listening to Radio 4 on the way in, and there was the head of Google in Google UK was on, and she was talking about use of AI being able to mainstream a lot of routine processing. I guess rather than just getting a piece of software, have we considered AI in terms of dealing with some of the process issues?
Not directly, so that there has been some discussion at the culture conference about the use of AI for some of these areas. I think we're probably in a position where we need to develop specifically our performance reporting tool and how that aligns with the HR core system to pull all that data out before we're in a position to consider how we sort of speed those processes.
So we're going to have a look at it at some point.
I would not say that's imminent, if I'm
No.
honest. I think that some of our processes are rather laborious. We need to look at how we streamline the
Okay.
processes and then how we streamline the systems before we advance on to stuff that's, I think.
I think I'd add that what AI is exciting in terms of the potential opportunities for the future. I think we're sort of some way away from being able to do that, where people, but there are examples where individuals have already started to utilise AI as part of their working business. But at the minute, it's blindingly obvious when it's AI and when it's not, in terms of some of the language that's used and so on. So I think that we're a way to go before we can bring that into our customer practice.
Yeah, I get that, but there's also opportunities to be in partnerships with some of these companies developing prototyping stuff, so that if we're behind on some of the tech parts, this gives us a chance to leapfrog. If we work in partnership with an aspiring software company that wants to use AI in the HR space. So I guess it's about, I mean, the HR people or so, Dominic, when you go to these conferences and these stands there are talking about the opportunities, and we should be not just looking to incrementally improve, but step change improvement. Not for now, I mean, yeah.
No, I was just going to comment. When I worked in the policy department, we introduced an AI chatbot for our reward process, and it cuts out a lot of our sort of manual processes. And it was a proof of concept that we developed with our ICT departments. But there was a lot of capability brought in to help us develop that. But yeah, the art of the possible, I agree we should be looking at.
Yeah, and I think we've all experienced being on the receiving end of AI chatbots and trying to get, sometimes it can be frustrating, but you know, if it takes out 60% of.
So we have got the digital transformation project within the transformation stream, and we'll look at a lot of those areas, and we'll currently be looking at the ICT strategy that I hope will capture some of our aspirations in terms of digital transformation and how we move that forward in terms of use of personal devices or review of future technology. So
And my last point would be, there's an awful lot of elements contained within these spreadsheets. And it's great that we've got all that work. Then when I looked at the work plan at the back end, it didn't seem to have a huge amount of items of work in it. Are they more headline items of work? Where all these are subset?
Yeah, so the headline items, what I was going to suggest that we bring this back to this committee perhaps on a more regular basis, so that
Right.
we can keep an oversight of how we're doing in terms of progress and linking it into the work plan next year.
Yeah, that'd be good. Then we can have that as a kind of a running item in the. Okay. Right. Anything else on this? Item? No. And then so we note the recommendations and thank you for the brilliant. Yeah. Moving on then. That's target, minutes.
It is me, yes. It's the first time I've been to one of these, so me. So I'm not sure what I'm.
Stand by.
Yeah, maybe. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the occupational health report that was submitted, so I'd like to just go through that. I've got some comments on things that are changing and sort of perhaps like different direction that we want to take. So this is obviously, it's until April 24 and quite a lot of things, till the end of March 24, and quite a lot of things have changed within the unit. Staffing is different in that the senior occupational health position retired at the end of March. So we lost 2.5 doctor days. I have increased a day, but we're still below what we were previously, and we've got an increased workload. So that is going to be something that needs to be addressed moving forward. New governance, we're working more closely with HR, with Lisa. Historically, occupational health has been set apart and not necessarily, although it's under the umbrella of people services, it's not necessarily been in that umbrella. And although there are issues with confidentiality and this needed to be separate for a large extent, the governance structure and things like that do need to be improved. And so that's now happening in that we're coming under the governance of people services, preparing more data, looking at being more strategic about planning occupational health services. Our role is to provide support physically, psychologically, fitness-wise for the firefighters and for corporate staff. Some programs have taken precedence over others, and really our aim is to try and get a holistic approach back and to for all of those areas to be valued. There's also a change in our workload in that, as well as looking at fitness for work, there are some statutory requirements with regards to the HSE and health surveillance that have become apparent more recently following an HSE visit. A couple of years ago, there are now health surveillance for isocyanates and arm vibration, noise, and all these things which are increasing our workload. So those have got to be addressed, basically. So things are changing moving forward. But if we look at last year, we can see the number of cases that we're seeing. It's a mixture of health surveillance and routine medicals to assess fitness for work, and case management. So being referred cases, people who are off sick or have medical issues that they need advice on. In the past, we have had the setup where we could refer for private opinions and private investigations. That was put on hold in March for budgetary concerns, mainly other issues surrounding it, and that's something that will need to be addressed. I believe that it was instituted back in 2001, I think. It's been going for a long time, and it was based on a case evaluation that the occupational health physician did at the time, looking at cost effectiveness of people having people on long-term sick leave compared to getting them seen more quickly in the private sector and getting them treated and back to work. And that, I think that's what the original basis to it was. Obviously, we've got problems at the moment because following COVID and because of the problems in the NHS anyway, waiting lists are very long. So we have got a lot of firefighters on long sick leave waiting for investigations, waiting for opinions. So that is an issue as far as occupational health is concerned. We still provide counselling and physiotherapy, which are very helpful in getting some of the people with physical injuries back into work more quickly. But there is still a group that are sitting on long-term sick leave because of the problems in the NHS. So that's one thing that's important to us, really.
In reference cost benefit analysis,
Yeah, I mean, this is all before my time, but apparently it was done. We have them.
front to the bottom.
Oh, I'm on different pages to you, sorry. Yeah, and I've made separate notes. So here we are. So yes, it was been in place since 2001, and it was Dr. Will Davis was the chief medical advisor then, and he looked at, I think, 5 case studies and looked at how long they would likely to be on sick leave without private investigations and treatment and costs of pay, sick pay, and the implications for the service of, you know, the numbers being affected, and worked out how much private treatment cost. And apparently it was decided at that time it was a cost-effective way to manage cases that would be waiting a long time on the NHS. So that's historical, and that had been in place since I joined in 2014. That had been the process that we had followed. But obviously that needs to be reevaluated and is being reevaluated. I don't know, that's separate to us.
It's a piece of work that we're doing at the moment, while we're looking at the occupational health support provision and what the service needs versus what we've got resources to be able to provide, and whether we need to allocate those resources for best value then.
Okay, much time?
Probably looking 6 to 8 weeks
Yeah.
now.
Oh, yeah, before the next committee.
This is quite an unusual service in that having a dedicated occupational health unit is not common throughout fire services. So a lot of other fire and rescue services, for example, in West Wales, who I've worked for, they have no provision for any, they don't have physiotherapy, they don't have counselling, they don't have any other provision. So their firefighters are just sitting waiting, which causes big problems. So, you know, there's already a big benefit in here in having a dedicated occupational health unit, and providing physio and counselling, all of those things are still really beneficial.
I suppose there's a midway point as well, isn't there, where you can have some signposting people where quite often people don't know quite where to go to get the services they want.
Well, we do that anyway, and we've
Yeah.
always done that, and that would be your first port of call. And you know, our priority in occupational health is that we are not replacing primary care services. We are an occupational health service, so our objective is to look at their health and fitness in relation to work, because that's what the primary role of the occupational health unit is. So they're always asked to see their GP, and if they come to us without having seen their GP, they will be signposted to their GP. They will be requested to go on NHS waiting lists. But an appointment to see an orthopaedic surgeon for an opinion at the moment varies between 12 and 24 months just to get seen. A waiting list for surgery can be 2, 3, 4 years. So if you've got a firefighter who has a significant injury, they'll be waiting for a very long time. So there needs, you know, that's the information that needs to be built into the evaluation, which it is.
Okay, all right. Okay.
We've provided the numbers. Referrals go up and up and up on a yearly basis. Obviously, routine medicals have been skewed slightly because we couldn't carry them out during COVID, not fully. They were partial medicals that were done, so we have played catch up. But that's not the main part of our work. What is increasing is the referrals for advice on both physical and psychological issues. And obviously within the umbrella of occupational health are the health and fitness advisors, and they're dealing with a lot of firefighter fitness issues as well. So the numbers keep growing. There've been some strategies, and certainly I would say the health and fitness advisors have done a lot about being very proactive, looking at giving advice on fitness, nutrition, exercise, doing building an intranet page, setting up activities such as walking groups and fitness examples. They've done yoga training so that they can work with people on flexibility. I would say within the clinical side of it, for the doctors and nurses, we haven't really got time to be looking at preventative strategies more. And I think that as an occupational health unit, that's where we should be going really. We need to be refocusing our time, but we will need additional resources to do that because we are doctor time down, we're nurse time down. Doctors need to see some of the cases. They can't be replaced by nurses. There are certain things like LGB medicals, complicated cases, ill health retirement, assessments for the health and safety executive. So hand-arm vibration, asbestos noise, they all have to be doctors, and they can't be any doctor, they have to be an appointed doctor. So there are specific criteria that determine how the resources will be managed within occupational health.
Right, because in the NHS, they're looking at the sort of tiering of various grades as to only a doctor can see this and a doctor
Yeah.
can see that. But they're also moving to physicians associates, then you've got advanced nurse practitioners.
They are moving to physicians associates, but there's a huge issue with that at the moment within the medical profession, because physicians associates aren't trained to do some of the things that they're doing at the moment. So there's a big backlash, and there's going to be a lot of legal implications.
Yes, that's quite, yeah. Well, in part, that's that professional.
You think it's the professions trying to keep their
Yeah.
own thing?
There's a bit of turf
I-
going on.
Sometimes there is, but I think the physicians associate is a bigger issue at the moment than anything to do with that, because they've been misrepresented in what they can do. Specialist nurse practitioners absolutely have a huge role to play because they have received additional training.
Do we have anything?
No, our nurses they're occupational health trained.
Correct.
They can do a lot of the work. They do a lot of case management. They do all the routine medicals. But from a statutory point of view, they're not allowed to do LGV medicals.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to do health and safety medicals. It has to be. So the asbestos medicals that we have to do as a statutory requirement, hand-arm vibration, which is relevant to some of the people working in the workshops, noise-related assessments.
There's a grey area. My point is there's a grey area between doctors.
For some things.
Yeah, and that's what. If we,
Most of the nurses do most of the work in the occupational
Right,
health unit.
yeah.
They do a lot of the consultations. But if they see a case that they don't feel capable of dealing with, it will be referred on to the doctor.
Yeah.
And there are a number of cases that have to be seen by the doctor. And so you can't replace it all with nurse time. And you need to have a balance within the unit.
okay. I mean, it's an interesting discussion between the BMA and trusts about the position of AMPs and also physicians associates.
I don't think the BMA have a big issue with AMPs because they have a,
No, because no, they wouldn't. No, but
Because they have-
college of nursing.
yeah.
AMPs. I'm just saying the BMA has a big thing about physicians associates.
Yeah, I think all medical do, because if you look at what the physicians associates training program involves, it's much less rigorous than an AMP's.
Okay, well, it's not for here, but
Yeah.
I think there's flexibility in there in the future.
There is possibly, I think it's certainly worth looking at, but there will be, if you
Things they
get rid
can't
of
do, but
doctor's
there's
time.
things they can do.
Not really in the occupational health setting. I think there's a difference between the NHS setting where there's a lot of different areas of work and a lot of different tiers of work.
Okay.
I think if you want to come and have a look at the occupational
I
health
will,
unit and
yeah.
kind of see what we do, then there is less of a distinction. There are less tiers of work, and occupational health medicine involves a lot more of a legal aspect. So there are a lot more considerations that need to come into it rather than being able to do a physical activity.
In relation to all the staff in the organisation, you talked about fitness and health and
Yeah.
being fitter and healthier you are, the better you are to recovery because your body's better tuned
Yeah.
into it. Am I right in thinking that everyone in the organisation has got access to gyms?
Yes.
Every
Yeah.
single person.
Everybody does.
So everyone would have the opportunity to promote their own fitness.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, and that's what those are also the initiatives that the Health and Fitness Advisors have done, of putting the page on the internet, giving nutrition advice, giving
Yeah.
fitness advice, sort of trying to promote health promotion rather than treatment, so prevention rather than waiting till issues occur.
Yes. I suppose there's the whole thing about the food that people eat as well, isn't there?
There is, and they've done nutrition advice as well. They've provided that so people can access that information all across the service. It's not just operational factors.
Yeah, no, great.
There is also the employee assistance programme that is available, but my comment would be that that's not always as well signposted as it might be. And I think it would be useful for work to be done on making every employee aware of it and how to access it and seeing it as a viable alternative. At the moment, it's like, I want to go to occupational health, but actually that's a resource that's being provided by the service that I think could be utilised a lot better. So that's work that would be useful. And my other comment would just be about sort of integrating us into the service more and perhaps a better understanding of what occupational health is. So I did a while ago did a presentation to middle managers about what we can and what we can't do, and about not replacing primary care, encouraging people to access their GPs as their first point of contact when it's appropriate to send people to us, and when it's not, what we can and what we can't do. And I think that would be useful for that to be a regular, because obviously managers change all the time, so it would be useful for that to be a regular programme of education so that we get the best out of the occupational health unit.
Yeah.
And yeah, just moving forward, we'd like to do more health promotion and more activities like that. From the strategic development point of view, we're looking at a patient management system, because we currently use SharePoint like the rest of the service, and it's not suitable really as a patient management system. It's hard to follow clinical notes, and it's difficult to do recalls for medical services. So that's a project that's underway at the moment. So our senior nurse and our senior medical admin are writing specifications for the patient management service at present. And we're hoping that we will have, in the Morris report, it suggested that we should have a manager who's sort of separate to human resources to maintain the confidentiality and maintain the sort of integrity of the occupational health unit. And that's something that's being looked at the moment, so that there's more of an overview of the unit, both the clinicians and the admin team, so that we can be more strategic moving forward to put in place some of the plans that we want to. So that is also a project that Lisa is working on at the moment. No?
Got one question about table 6 of your report, about the council requirement.
Yeah.
5% are did not attend, and split between forgetful due to the nature of being out in the fall. Be useful to know how many's been out in the fall of the project and if it's got. I mean, people often want to get these permits and then they're missing them. So 5% quite a number. I was wondering, do we do any work to try and what do we do to try and reduce that did not attend? I get the unable to attend.
So when the counselling service is separate to us, that's provided by an external provider, and we book the appointments, but they do the follow-up. They do text as reminders, and they do the sort of follow-up appointments. Our staff will then ring them and ask if there was a reason why they couldn't come, if they want to rebook. But you're dealing with a group of people who are quite distressed, who often have conflicting appointments, say with a GP or something. So there is always going to be a level of non-attendance at those kind of appointments.
Conflicting one, is that be unable to attend? This is did not attend.
Well, yeah, unable to attend is if they ring us and tell us that they can't come. You might ring them and they say, oh, and then I got an appointment with my GP and I wanted to go down there. So this is a difficult group to manage, and that's actually quite a small DNA rate.
Right.
That is a small DNA rate compared to other appointments, compared to general practice, and compared to even our medical appointments. It's more of an issue with the medical appointments we book of cancellations at short notice or just not turning up.
Interesting, isn't it? People that don't attend appointments are hard to get. Because we talked about how various.
Yeah, and I would say that that's something that it would be useful to work on, and that's why having someone who's sort of managing occupational health overall, because it hasn't been like that previously, would be useful in looking at timing of appointments. So if you're booking people when they are actually on duty, then there is always the possibility that they'll go out on the shout and not be able to come on, and looking at reminders. So with the new patient management system, it would have the facility to send out a text reminder the day before, which often then prompts people to ring up and say, oh, I actually can't make it. But DNA rates, I've done a huge project on this in general practice, and there is no effective way of really reducing DNA rates. It is human behaviour.
Which can be changed.
Yes, partly.
So
And that's why things like
there
text,
is a way. It's not.
I don't think it's that simplistic, but yes, text reminders can be useful. Educating people when they turn up about the importance
Yes.
of coming for appointments. But then there's also the difference between someone coming for a routine medical, which they don't see as a priority, even though it's part of their terms of service, compared to someone who may be having an acute medical issue who does really want that appointment, and they're probably less likely to DNA. So it's not just as straightforward as people not turning up for appointments. It's much more complex. As I say, I spent 6 months doing a project on this in general practice with the University of South Wales, so it's something I do know about.
Okay, well, maybe we'll have a deeper discussion.
Yeah, lovely.
All right, anything else on your report? Anyone else got any comment?
I'm not going to comment. I've got a question.
Yeah.
That's probably your opinion on it. And you talked about the need for us to get ahead in terms of prevention. You talked about some stuff that's been imposed on us through changes in legislation, health
Yeah.
safety or whatever.
Yeah.
Be interested in your take on where you think we are as a sector and as a service in relation to the contaminants issue being imposed upon us, or is getting ahead of it in terms of health screening.
Well, that's a huge topic, and I've just sort of joined the committee for contaminants and work. And my first issue is that I'm very concerned that the concern around contaminants will take over the whole of the occupational health services within the fire sector. And there is obviously evidence that there is risk to firefighters from contaminants, and that there are figures that suggest that there are cancers that are more important in firefighters. That is without doubt, you don't have to question that. The issue with the Fire Brigade Union have about instituting screening is much less clear, because there's not a lot of evidence based about that. There are not, for every medical condition, there is not a good screening tool, and you have to look at effectiveness of screening. You use a comparison of numbers needed to treat, say in the health service, about whether a medication will be brought in, and you can use the same sort of numbers needed to be screened to identify one case and whether screening is effective or not, and that is much less obvious. So to jump to let's screen everybody for everything, there is no evidence to suggest that's it. My concern is that we will be pushed in that direction, and it will be at the detriment of other areas of occupational medicine which are much more important to the firefighters on the ground, so that anything that's done needs to be in as a holistic approach, and it needs to be part of making healthier firefighters, not just because of contaminants, but making them fitter, looking at cardiovascular events much more than we do, because that's the big issue with firefighters that's being ignored at the moment because it's not on brand. So it is important. I do agree that there's evidence there that things need to be done. I think we need to be very careful about what screening we put in place. And I think we need to do it in the context of firefighters' health in general.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the reason why I asked is about that capacity issue, and I'm
Yeah.
very aware of that. I think that the problem is, of course, that this is a problem of the past, because all of the work
Yeah.
that we can do around prevention now means
It's
that
going to be very
for the
different.
future we'll be in a different
Yeah.
position. So then you're looking back to people who are my era and
Yeah.
before my era, who are the people that who.
I mean, for example, the figures that have come out, the two cancers that they have shown to have an increased incidence in firefighters are bladder cancer, which is a very common cancer in men and has a lot of other risk factors that are probably a lot more important, or certainly as important, that need addressing, and mesothelioma, which is a tumour of the lining of the lungs related to asbestos exposure, which takes 30 to 40 years to develop. So the people being diagnosed with it now worked 30 to 40 years ago in very different conditions. So a knee-jerk reaction to change everything now is not necessarily the right way to go, and especially if it's at the expense of other health issues.
Thank you for that. Useful.
Really interesting. Well, on my first time I got while I was contamination, both with brown and blue asbestos.
Right.
About 40 years ago.
Okay. I mean, the thing of this, though, is that a lot of what we need to do doesn't need to have resources thrown at it and doing lots of expensive tests and doing things. Most of it is educational. So when firefighters come for routine medicals, we talk to them about this. And for example, when I do an asbestos now, which I have to do because the health and safety executive agreed with the national fire chiefs that it would be done. Really, all I'm doing generally is, I know they haven't got asbestosis because they're fit and well and they're firefighting. I'm telling them in later life, if you get a cough or shortness of breath, make sure you tell someone that you're a firefighter and may have been exposed to asbestos, because then they will look for the relevant conditions. And that doesn't take a lot of time or effort.
What was the point you made just earlier, a few minutes ago? You said about more concerns about cardiovascular, but that's not on brand.
Well, it isn't, because at the moment, the big thing that Fire Brigade Union are pushing on is about contaminants in firefighters. But actually, cardiovascular health in firefighters for a long time has been a much more important issue and isn't necessarily addressed. So we're looking at fitness, but, if you want to do some screening, you're better doing blood pressures for all the firefighters and all the operational firefighters. There are now blood pressure monitors on station. But if you want to do one test, what I'm saying is cholesterol might be more important than anything to do with contaminants. But the push from externally is for looking at contaminant work at the moment.
So if we looked at what do we think what the risks are to the firefighters? What are the issues that you've seen in the conditions that people are coming for their medicals? It might be cardiovascular, it might be obesity, it could be a whole range.
Obesity is a big issue. Obesity is a big issue, and then that plays into the cardiovascular events. A lot of physical injuries are a big thing for firefighters. So it's dealing with those, and orthopedics is one of the hardest areas to access within the NHS because of the workload there. So contaminants, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm absolutely agreeing it's important, but it's not more important than anything else that we need to deal with.
There's just things like cardiovascular and blood pressure, those sort of things, that they can be preventative.
Yes, and we do that as they have their blood pressure checked as part of their routine medical, but then they don't have, say, cholesterol checked or a blood glucose checked. And I'm not saying that that's not necessarily what we should be doing as a fire service occupational health unit. A lot of what we can do is educational, and certainly if you've got a firefighter who smokes or a firefighter who's got a high BMI, I would always advise them to go and see their GP and have this done. But because of the difficulties, that probably doesn't happen. So my point is that there's a much wider scope of health prevention than just looking at contaminant work.
No chips. Right, okay, thank you very much indeed. Moving on then, the next one, and we've got the grievance and disciplinaries.
So just to give some context, under the Employment Rights Act, employers have a statutory obligation to have both a grievance procedure under which employees that feel aggrieved are given the opportunity to have their issues resolved in a fair and just manner, and a disciplinary procedure to have set standards of conduct, attendance and performance, and to ensure that treatment is fair and consistent for all employees. During the culture review of 2023, the service contracted support from an external HR company to support the volume of cases and allowing the caseload to be managed during a period of transition. And just make note that the number of cases in the statistical analysis of this report were referred to in the Morris report and some of the recommendations. There were a total of 128 disciplinary cases that had occurred between 2016 and 2023, which were reviewed by Fenella Morris and the Culture Review team. And this review highlighted inconsistent approaches to handling disciplinary and grievance issues, summarising that a lenient approach to discipline previously led to the current position in the service. The review also noted that the recent reorganisation of people services indicates an improvement in ensuring that the service has a fair, impartial and balanced approach to disciplinary and grievance cases. During the financial year from April 23 to March 24, 10 formal grievances were received compared to 22 the prior year, appearing to return to pre-pandemic levels. And whilst during the same financial year there were 31 reported breaches of discipline, which is comparable to the prior financial year. There are occasions where the indicated allocations or behaviours are so serious that the service must consider if suspension of the employee is necessary. And it's a neutral act and instigated based on protecting either the investigation, so for example, concerned about something damaging evidence or influencing witnesses, protect the organisation if there's a genuine risk to our community property or interests, or a risk to other employees or the person under investigation. The recent reorganisation of people services has seen an introduction of a risk assessment in all cases where suspension is considered, and that is undertaken by a panel of 3 people to ensure that there's fairness and impartiality, so there's no one person makes the decision to instigate the suspension. A total of 21 suspensions were served during that financial year. Whilst it is double the number of suspensions served during the previous year, it does indicate the seriousness of the allegations or behaviours being investigated. Maybe also reinforces the findings of the Morris report that perhaps too lenient an approach was taken by the service previously. So in evaluating it, behaviour-related cases were amongst the highest levels, and as part of the ongoing change and transformation programme, skills development for employees is being reviewed in this arena. The service has implemented a behaviours overview committee which provides rigorous oversight of disciplinary and grievance cases as well as complaints, and also considers positive disclosures from the current programme to undertake DBS checking for existing employees and our potential new recruits under our safer recruitment improvement activities. Again, asking the Commissioner to take notes and consider the report.
Any comments or questions? Thank you for this. Yeah, really appreciate the references to the Morris report. And so my question would be about, we've put all these amendments in and there's a pressure on resources because we've got an increase in the caseload that's coming. And I know that we've had to bring in additional resources. But what would your view be on the timeframes that are involved? Do you think that we're operating at the right speed? Some suspensions seem to have taken a long time. There's complexity in some of the cases that they're investigating. If we look at the well-being of staff, if they're suspended for a long time, it can be a very difficult place. No one is mentally prepared to be suspended before they are. So it can affect their return to work if when they do. So in terms of the time to investigate, do you think we're at an optimum, or do you think we've got more work to do in making it as efficient as possible?
I think in some cases we're optimum. It depends on the complexity of the case. So there's some cases that could be quicker. As you've alluded, there's complex cases as well with counter allegations. So for example, there'll be cases that have got extensive interviews of 20 plus witnesses in the investigation. So is it optimum across the board? No, there's some more work to be done. But again, recruitment of additional resources and the restructuring of people services has helped that. But all suspensions are reviewed weekly.
Okay. And what is the result of those reviews then? Is it that it's all fine, or things need to be adjusted?
Sometimes they're adjusted, sometimes the risk is no longer there, so the suspension can be lifted and either a return to the workplace while the investigation concludes, or adjusted duties and an alternative to suspension. But is the risk that instigated the suspension in the first place still relevant? And in which case then can it be assessed as being able to be lifted or just?
Good, I'm glad that there is that sort of detailed insight into that and that frequency.
Thanks, Chair. So there's also the complexity around the police. So sometimes we are told to wait back because of potential for people involved getting harmed, or being subject to more abuse or inappropriate behaviour. So we have that dynamic going on as well. And I think there are a couple of cases where we have on the books at the moment been asked to hold back.
But there was the flip to that was Morrison, sometimes we waited too long for the police before we did anything.
So we have instigated a suspension and then we're almost in a holding pattern while we await for the police to do whatever necessary in their criminal investigation. But I think the criticism with the Morris report was that we didn't even enact a suspension. So we will take action and remove the individual from the workplace whilst the safeguarding matter is being evaluated, whereas historically perhaps that didn't happen until charges were made.
The other thing that probably changed and enhanced is the interaction with the police.
Yeah.
It takes place at a much more regular interval, and it's escalated to the police to sort of apply pressure to get them to move a little bit more quickly into their investigation, so that we can move in our place as well.
Yeah.
So I think this is always going to be a thing where people are keeping a close eye on it, because it's unfortunately a significant part of the workload is drawn to it. But I think, as you referenced, the nature of some of the complaints, these things have maybe been latent, never exposed to them, people feel more confident coming forward, and we can expect more of this until we get the work of the transformation program through that looks to inform people of how we expect it to be. Right. Okay, great. So in a similar vein, then moving on to item 7. Have you as well? Was wrong?
That one's me.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So as a service, we recognise this high standards in respect of openness and accountability. And as part of that, we need mechanisms for both employees and members of the public to feel able to raise both complaints and compliments. So in the financial year of 23-24, there were no whistleblower disclosures, and the number of complaints received by the service increased by 14% compared to the previous year, so an increase from 66 to 75 complaints. Complaints are dealt with by our business support team, and they're classified primarily into four main areas of behaviour: bribing, service delivery, and then miscellaneous. And behaviour last year accounted for 44%, so that was the primary classification for complaints. Turning to compliments, those also increased last year, this time by 34%, something from 82 up to 112. And you'll see on page 45, that's much more in line with the previous numbers of complaints that we've been getting over the last 5 years. Since April 2023, we've also introduced an anonymous Speak Up service, FRS Speak Up. The members of the public, as well as employees, can report concerns. Page 46 and 47 then talks through that in a bit more. So we had 53 complaints raised using that service the last financial year, of which 46 of them were online one-way communication methods. That causes us some problems internally in terms of we're not necessarily getting the amount of information to enable us to investigate this properly, but all concerns are investigated and there's an audit trail to show the action taken in those circumstances. We're working with FRS Speak Up from Crime to Stop to try and encourage people to leave a lot more information so we can look at things in more detail. We're also establishing a comms plan, a comms strategy to highlight to employees all the different ways they can raise concerns and when raising concerns to give us as much information as possible. In terms of the report then, that's probably everything I wanted to draw attention to, so I'm asking you to consider any contents and if you've got any questions.
Okay, anyone got any comments on this question?
Yeah, I've got so in terms of the complaints, and this is just an issue of understanding for me in terms of when something that comes in as a complaint moves across into potentially disciplinary investigation. We take it off one list and add it to the other so that we're not counting, or how does that process work?
I think it's stay in the complaint count, so automatically the head of operations and myself are copied in on the complaint behavioural related. So they're the ones that tend to move into the disciplinary arena then. So there is a potential for them to be double counted, but the count is complaints received and then it'll move into our arena as a case to be managed.
Yeah, but closing it down in one place and moving it over to any managed in one location. It's just for reporting through, because I know that 6 monthly we report through to Welsh Government, and I know historically we've reported things like complaints, and you look at some of them and you say that really that shouldn't really be in that list. So it's just about accuracy of data and reporting it through in a consistent way. So we wanted to raise that really for the future to look out. I suppose the other thing to mention, Gabrielle mentioned then about the problems that we've experienced in terms of having meaningful information that we can actually investigate thoroughly from the anonymous nature of phone calls, email, online submissions. It's made that difficult historically. We are looking at innovative solutions to try to address some of that by working with external organisations who may be able to provide that anonymity, but also, because of their being external to the organisation, to go back to those people, they have who they are, but we don't, type of thing. And then it is a need for us to get more information for us to have that. So we are working with developing a system process where that could, given that it's very early stages, recognition of the fact that this problem is one that has the risk of drowning out those real victims, those people who need to come forward in the noise of people who may just be disgruntled with previous decision making, or may have heard along the grapevine that something's happened and there's no real fact, substance, or evidence behind it. I think we need to sort of fight through that noise and get to some actual evidence-based investigations and wrongdoing.
Yeah, there was in the last couple of paragraphs we talk about we're working with Crime Stoppers, we're working with the crime scene. are there any timeframes on that? Will we, when will those outcomes be? When will we have finished working with private officers, have a thing that we're happy with? When will the comms plan, so the staff are aware, when do you expect that to be?
So, yeah, so we've got some initial comms that we're reviewing at the moment, so that should go live in the next week or so. And then it'll be a case of just keeping an eye on, what impact that's having. But as has been explained, the information that we see coming through is very limited in terms of allowing us to investigate. So we do need to do a bit more kind of reassuring to people and explaining, when they ring up, what type of further information can they share with us.
I think just as a general thing for reports and when they come forward, anything where there are actions, probably want timeframes, because otherwise these things can just roll and roll and roll. Okay, any other comments on that? No, thank you. Right, then that takes us to item 8, the broad work plan. Missing it,
Yeah, so this is our first look at sort of some high level activities going on. I think probably we'd want to review this in terms of the conversation we have today. So for the next meeting in November, we have an annual training report that would be presented, our recruitment traction assessment following our last full-time campaign. Performance reviews, that's our appraisal process, so we'll look at that. What's the return rate looking like? We introduced that a few years ago, so we want now to be looking at some of the data. What's the quality of those reviews looking like? Investors and people would like to bring an update on where we are with our accreditation and job evaluation. So we undertook a job evaluation exercise probably about 3 years ago now. So it's an opportunity for us to just have a look at where we are in terms of what new requests have come through. Are job rates relatively static across the organisation, or are we being asked to reevaluate roles in light of changes in the market situation? I think for the March meeting, there are 2 statutory items on this: the pay policy statement we must publish every year, and the gender pay gap as well we must publish. We'll have a look at what more we need to bring in March, I think, because that's quite light.
Okay. We've taken from the first paper, the action plan, the thread through.
Yes.
Well, when it comes to recruitment, I suppose what would be useful to know is that from the time we go out, from the time we decide we want a job, right, person to fill a role, are we at the optimum in being able to get them through the door? Because I wonder how many people, good people can always find jobs, and if we go out and then we sort of get someone half interested and then we're not quick enough to land them for whether it's getting their occupational health things sorted out, whether it's getting their DBS vetting text sorted out, whatever, it can be missed opportunities. So I'd be interested to know where we are in terms of recruitment, in terms of the speed with which we can get people in, and not just comparing ourselves against our own standards, but the standards in the private sector or within other fire sectors, fire services, as to how fast they can get people through the door, the time a job evaluation starts to the time till that.
Probably suggest that it's actually our process to get the job advertised in the first place is where we could do a lot of work right now, because we've got departments that are struggling to get the resource in place because our process needs to be optimized. It's not at the moment. So that's a piece of work we're looking at the moment as to how we can make that far more efficient than it currently is. There's people around the table that have experienced frustrations with that.
Some of that, I think, is around having a forward work plan with processes which are predicted long into the future, that you can align all of these things. I think the other thing is, of course, to recognise that we're in a period of unprecedented change with the need posts that have been developed and created as a result. But necessarily predicted in the long term. I guess the only thing that the other thing that I thought that might be useful in the forward work plan is following the round of promotional awards that have kicked off already, update in relation to the progress for all of those promotional boards and where we are in terms of people coming through, the skills, any themes or emerging issues that we might need to address from a developmental to address any of the reasons why people fall short in promotional processes.
I think some of these things are, the annual reports are backward looking. I think in the construction of those reports, if we find to have the backward looking part, which tells us what we've done, it'd be really important to have what we intend to do.
Absolutely.
So that otherwise annual reports are, well, I think it's the projection about this didn't work particularly well, and therefore we put this in place. It will be done by such and such a time, be resolved. Or this we did really, really well, and we're continuing to do it, and blah blah blah.
Strategy, isn't it? So, you know, look forward.
Okay. Anything else on this report? No. I haven't been informed of anything that's any items isn't urgent, because we wouldn't generally consider AOB unless it was urgent before, because the cycle for this committee is that we can't be dealing with urgent stuff generally because we don't meet to deal with it. So I haven't been told of anything, therefore close this meeting. Thank you very much, Lee.